Hi, Steve, and welcome. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of HR Hacks and Halos. And today I'm with Steve Dorward. He's an ERP consultant, an enterprise architect, and an AI wrangler. And he's been working with AI, machine learning, and automation since 2018. So, Steve, welcome to the podcast. It's a real pleasure for me to have you here. I know what an enterprise architect is, but can you tell me what an AI wrangler is?
Thank you, Jivan. Thanks for the opportunity to come along. Interesting series you have. So at AI Wrangler, I joined a podcast maybe 6 months ago, whilst I was with a public sector company, and I was introduced then as an AI Wrangler, and I quite liked that. It's not. It's very differentiates me from being an AI cowboy, I guess. So
Yeah.
I would frame it as I've done lots of various different things around, as you said, machine learning, around automation. I would say pre-Chat GPT buzz, as you say, going back to sort of 2018, my time with Lloyds Bank. So from then, I've sort of tinkered with various aspects of it, and then been involved in numerous things since then, looking at product assessments, looking at security, and trying to keep on top of the AI hype that we can all see.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was AI like then?
I would say back in sort of it feels a long time ago now, but it was, when AI was mentioned, it was all science fiction and, doomsday scenario from a commercial sense. And interesting, given that you're the HR angle, I was also looking at it from an HR perspective for employee engagement for
Yeah.
HR platforms. So I worked quite closely with IBM and their Watson tools. So if you remember back to Gary Kasparov and his he was beaten in the late 80s, early 90s by a machine, if you will, and that was the early versions of Watson. And then, it disappeared off the scene for a few years, and then some of the larger software as a service vendors, Workday, SAP, got involved and started to roll out some of that. So yeah, it was inbuilt into commercial products, cloud products, if you will, and then obviously the kickoff with ChatGPT and generative AI as it's known.
Yeah. And that's maybe we can start there. Can you tell me first of all what's the difference between AI and Gen AI?
So what I've found is, artificial intelligence. If you just break out those two words, well, artificial is not real. It's not made by humans. That's fairly, artificial grass, artificial plants. Everyone, I guess, knows what that is.
Yeah.
The difficult word in that relationship, I think, is intelligence, because everyone has intelligence, whether you've been educated, whether, I was lucky enough to go through full education in Scotland, lucky enough to go to university as it was, and carried on, lifelong learning. So the intelligence word, I think, is quite interesting. Even if you just Googled for it. So what seems to have happened is AI, or artificial intelligence, is the wrapper that everyone uses. Most of the time, I think, from my experience, they'll be talking about generative AI.
Yeah.
And generative AI, or generative artificial intelligence, is the ability to create something new from existing content.
Okay.
So what OpenAI, the company that released ChatGPT back in November 2022, cottoned on to this idea of having a natural language conversation. So rather annoyingly, they introduced NLP as an acronym, not neuro-linguistic programming that has been around a long time. So they're starting to throw all these terms out, and large language models and generative AI. So AI, I guess, is the wrapper for all applied sciences of machine learning, of automation. Yeah. The big difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning, folks will probably use them, to mean they think it's the same thing, which is, it's fair. I mean, we may confuse different terms in the HR world, people director or HR director. It's probably as subtle as that. The machine learning side comes from the machine is able to learn from you. On this call, Riverside, machine learning is in the background. It's doing noise cancellation, interestingly or not. So it's not using ChatGPT. It's not using OpenAI, it's not using generative AI to do that. It's learned the sound of a dog barking or someone. So that's machine learning. That's probably a good separation. They kind of overlap. And then you've got other things like you've maybe heard of process automation. So things can, be done by machine quickly. It's a difficult one to break out because everyone's coming at it with a different level of knowledge, but I would kind of break it out into those sort of three chunks.
Yeah, certainly in terms of the RPA, the robotic process automation, is the world that I kind of came and really started to experience it a number of years ago, because I've been working in outsourcing for a number of years now. And that was kind of part of the tooling that came with the efficiencies that can be gained through outsourcing and through the automation that organizations can get their hands on as a consequence of that sort of hybrid model of in-house and a combination of outsourcing some of those functions. So I know what you're talking about, but there has been huge strides, hasn't there, in terms of what AI and Gen AI is now capable of doing. Is it true, Steve, that perhaps that there isn't anything actually left to learn now? That's what I'm hearing. Is that just a myth?
Well, there's probably two things in terms of the learn and the hype. Gartner, who I'm sure you've heard of, large US-based consultancy, have something called the hype curve, and it's based in psychology. It's based around something new coming into an organization. So generative AI and various different flavors of generative AI, so text to audio, text to video, text to image, have all gone through that hype curve, and people have realized, it's not as good as I sort of thought it was. So I think it's reached the, what's the phrase, jump the shark. It's raised this mark. I mean, you'll see it branding on, I saw an AI powered toothbrush, and I thought, why are you doing that? It's marketing. So an awful lot of it is marketing. You'll see AI on everything. Yes, AI helps pick your, machine learning helps pick your Netflix movies. It's on everything. So there's the branding side. So people are suffering a phrase I've termed, AI indigestion, if you will. There's so much of it, and people are either bored of it or tuned out. I mean, my two sisters are technophobes, not really interested in it at all, don't understand it. I took some time to do that and then gave up, because there has to be an interest. The industry that you're in, that I'm in, there is interest in it from a workplace perspective. But if you've not had that driver, helping kids with their homework, OpenAI, I think what OpenAI did was it brought it to the masses. It brought the intention of generative AI, certainly that piece. I think that would be a fair description.
Yeah. Thank you for setting that context, because I think it's quite important, because we're here today to try and answer the question, who owns AI in the corporate house? And I think partly the question is tongue-in-cheek, but I think the seriousness of it is, when we're bringing AI into the corporate world, there has to be an owner. So first of all, perhaps, Steve, you can kind of explain in your own words, why does it matter who owns AI in the corporate house?
Thanks for that. Yeah. Again, I can only go on my experience of doing it in public sector, or saying doing it. I keep calling AI a thing, like it's a person, and I think that's one of the dangers. It's what is it? It's for me, it's a capability. It's a revolution. It's it's not the new electricity, as some people are thinking. But the piece really for me is, if you have the artificial intelligence. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Is that okay?
That's okay. Don't worry. Sorry. We can edit this bit out.
Could you ask me that question again?
Yeah,
sorry,
of course. Don't worry.
This is what I tend to do. Sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry. Just take a deep breath. It's all right.
Sure.
So, Steve, thank you so much for setting that context. And I think it's really important that we had that, because the important question that we're trying to answer in today's podcast is, who owns AI in the corporate house? So first of all, let's ask the question, why does it matter who owns it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and as you say, that's why we're here. So why does it matter? It matters because it's not one thing, as we've just talked about. It's it could be machine learning, it could be data science, it could be language models. So depending on what type of organization you are, if you are an environment agency and you're using high-powered computing, you've been running machine learning for 10, 15 years. So you'll have people in your organization that know data science, boffins, if you want to call them that, doctors that know the real deep science around doing climate models. However, if you're in a small startup company, you're maybe looking at it from a marketing perspective. So again, it comes down to the case study that you're using. And what I've found and what I've sort of created in my little playbook, if you will, is an approach to say, when you go into an organization, most of the C-suite will point at, and again, this is my experience, will point at the CTO or the IT director because it's got artificial and intelligence and they think it's technology, which is fair because maybe that's the route in. They maybe start to look at it from the risk side. And then again, in every session I have at that level, I don't start with all the benefits. Yes, they're desperate to say how we can save money, how we can save head count, all that stuff. I said, let's start with the risks. Let's start with the perils before we talk about the promise. Let's talk about all the bad things that could happen, not the dystopian vision, but data leaks, Samsung losing prototypes for new phones, Apple banning it because it didn't want the risk of that data disappearing off. So, and I know, GDPR, and I know you're close to that with your background. So it really, for me, comes down to the lens of the organization. And I maybe cut it two ways. One is the sector that you're in. So is it private? Is it public?
Yeah.
And then the actual type. Are you a manufacturing company? Is that your intellectual property in there? If you lost that, would your company fold? So I think that dynamic plays in, and then that alters the conversation that you have at that C-suite. So my little trick is almost reusing a 1950s piece of technology or a business process to help shape another 1950s invention, as in artificial intelligence. So simple thing like the RACI or the RACI matrix, responsibility, accountability, considered and informed, really handy for this. So I part-filled it, took it to a C-suite, had them all there, and I said, right, I'm going to take you through this. And at the start, I'm saying, right, give me an indication of who you think owns IT. Sorry, who owns AI? They all pointed at the CTO. And I was on a call, so everyone's sort of looking at that person. They felt a little bit exposed. And I took them through that matrix. And I said, what I've done on the left-hand side is I've broken down all the different things that you need to do as an organization: your data privacy, your terms and conditions, your employee policy, your workplace AI policy, your guidelines. Listed it all down there, and then listed out the different C levels. So the CTO, the chief people officer, chief risk officer, not into maybe the more fantastic, chief happiness officers and all those ones. But the main.
I love
body,
that job title, the chief happiness officer.
I want that one. Yeah, I bet they've got a great expense budget, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And what I saw through that dynamic is they started to realise, hang on, this isn't IT, because I played it very straight and I said, we're talking about the workplace here. We're talking about impact. So who's being impacted by this? Yes, we've got the machine learning side. If it's a, meteorological piece, we've got that side, and that's understood, and that's technology, and that's data science. But if you're talking about impacting on employees, put yourself in the place of an employee. What's in it for the employee? Because the perception, rightly or wrongly, I was an employee, still am an employee. My perception is, yes, generative AI automation, it's great. It's taking work away from me. What's the net effect of that? My boss gives me more work. Not I can disappear off at 3 o'clock and go and play golf. It's all about what's in it for the employee. And I think this is the real problem certainly in HR and the area that you work in, is that lots of people talking about the noise and the narrative around it and productivity gains, but actually what's in it for the employee, the sort of hearts and mind. People are scared of it. People don't know what it's there for. But people carry on pushing it down the throat. And I think there needs to be that employee engagement side. I think.
Yeah, there's a bit of mythology around it, isn't there? And kind of and bad press. As you said early on, there's a huge hype about AI, but no one really knows how to describe it or the benefits or how it actually manifests itself within the workplace. Yes, you can use ChatGPT, and we all use that, and it can sometimes, some AI kind of does a fair amount of the heavy lifting. I was talking to someone that I used to work with, a chief people officer of an organization. And he was saying, well, once upon a time we could have written HR policies and it would have taken us months. Now it takes one afternoon. And it's not so much that it's doing all of the work so that it makes the person redundant. What it's doing is it's doing some of that heavy lifting. So actually you've got the main body of the work, which then still needs socialization. It then still needs personalizing for the business. So it's not really taking away anything. What it's doing is actually enhancing the role of the individual and actually helping to provide some of that initial content that the person can then own and actually do something with. But that isn't always the story that gets accompanied with AI.
No, and I think, telling those stories is important. And, the work I do is, as you said up front, sort of performance coach, showing people how to get the best use of it. So again, in that same case study, I went round sort of senior managers after that session. So I went and talked to the head of procurement. I went and talked to the head of marketing, and I said, I'm going to show you in the next 5 minutes how you can write a prompt. So that's, and you'll maybe have heard the term prompt engineering, which I don't like, because that again suggests technology, because you need to be an engineer. Prompt, the art of the prompt, as I call it, everyone will need to learn this tool, because people are using it already. That you talk to Alexa, you use your voice. So with these tools, you can talk to them. But the whole piece is about what you're trying to do is tell, if it's generative AI, what you want it to do. You're framing that piece of work. And it comes back to, I think, the point I didn't answer earlier about where these models came from. They've been trained on all the good and the bad of the internet. So Wikipedia's, the Reddits, but also all the good stuff, all the novels. There's lots of copyright cases out there. So think of it almost like, you're sitting with Google and you're sitting with ChatGPT or Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. They do different things. What you're asking through the prompt is you're being very directive to take your example. I'm an HR director. I want you to write me a policy for the impact of AI on the workplace. Now, as you say, that would probably take weeks to do. And in my experience, it took weeks to get that socialized. However, that heavy lifting, as you said, can be done in minutes to give you that policy to, because you can set the prompt up and say, give it a persona and say, you are an experienced AI technologist, or you're an experienced learning and development manager with 25 years of experience in these industries. And it's amazing what you'll get back. And I'm sure you and a number of your listeners will already have tried that. You then start to build up that rapport, build up that conversation with you. It suggests conversations that you maybe, or ideas that you'd maybe never thought of. So it's a real ideation springboard. I think that's where a lot of the value it comes from.
Absolutely. I like that. And as I'm listening to you, what I'm hearing is that you're kind of saying, well, actually, it's almost as though you're saying that HR owns AI, and that could be because those are the examples and the stories you've given so far. But one, am I right in that? And if I'm not right, then who would you suggest actually owns it?
Well, I think you've hit it on the head there. I mean, that's kind of where I was leading, and partly because I don't think the people director was, in this particular example, particularly wanted to be involved in leading it, because they didn't feel that it was their responsibility. But once I'd painted out the fact that the first thing that you have to do is write a policy for your employees, not a security policy. First, you have to decide on which tool you're actually going to select in the organization. Are you going to select ChatGPT? I'm not here to sort of give you the whys and wherefalls of them. They are a combination of personal choice and once you've done your own risk assessment, because everyone's got their different rules. Again, I did the risk assessment for a company. We found Copilot was better for those needs. When I played that back in that same session with the Raki matrix, it then became clear that the first thing we need to do after picking the tool was write a policy around what we want to tell staff on how to use it. Now, that took minutes to write that first draft, and then about 6 weeks to get the wording that everyone was comfortable with. The legal team, you can't say that in a policy because of this rule, or and again, we got into sort of some discussions around ethics. We got into some discussions around, well, where does it say that in the HR handbook? You've got a big gap there. So it started to uncover data privacy and, the employee handbook, if you will, needed updated in that particular example. And I'm sure you've maybe seen that in your experience as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But would that, in that example, in that scenario, could you have just run any policy through ChatGPT again and say, can you find us the pitfalls? Here's our handbook. Can you find us the pitfalls that we might be experiencing?
To a level, that's what I had, a little bit of back pocket going into that. I had the part filled. I didn't go into there with a completed one because I wanted that body of people, senior people, C-suite, to come to their own conclusions, have the discussion. As I say, it started off everyone pointing at the CTO. When I came out of it, everyone was pointing at each other, which I thought was a massive step forward, because someone was saying, well, hang on, people director, you own the workplace policy for this, and chief risk officer, you own if we have a data breach. So they start to realize it's not one thing. If we take it for generative AI, it's multiple components, which then takes you into that sort of capability map and takes me back to my sort of enterprise architecture roots. But I've used it 2 or 3 different times, and the really good example is if one of the C-suite has been on holiday. Because of the way Copilot works, there's a Copilot Office tool that allows you to summarize your inbox. That person at that level's probably got 200-300 emails if they've been off sunning themselves in a nice location. If you can show that person a personal productivity gain before the meeting, they're sold. They're sold on whether it's AI or you come back to that body of people and say, I need some budget to do something. They're sold. They don't have to be convinced again. So.
Yeah, exactly. And there you have it, the employee experience. It's actually helping individuals do their job more effectively, so they can actually be concentrating their energies on things that actually really matter. And if you can use the tool to scan through your emails and whiz through them, actually, and all of the other hard kind of like the tasks that take so much of the time, then it's a real win for any organization and a real benefit. I think my challenge, though, back to you, Steve, is that sometimes HR can they have to really kind of struggle and fight hard in order to get the investment in some of the tools that they need. So sometimes they're quite often still using ERP systems that have kind of really reaching the end of life, and they're only then receiving investment because there's nowhere else to go, and that employee data needs to be migrated onto another platform. When you are facing that kind of those sorts of issues where data is the issue and using systems that are fit for purpose, sometimes the conversation around AI, it's too much because it's not in the forefront of minds.
No, it's a very good point. And despite being from Dundee, people maybe kid me on about this. I did go to school and I do know my ABCs. However, in this example, it doesn't go A, B, C, D. It starts off with B, the business.
Yeah.
What do the business want to do? As in, what's the problem you want to solve? Whether it's employee policies, and again, I'm not even talking about AI or data or anything else here. So sort out what you want to do from the business side. What's your business problem? And then you can start to say, right, from that, I'm sorting out my business processes. I'm doing my business process mapping and my value chain piece of work to find out where my gaps and overlaps are.
Yeah.
That then leads you into the D in terms of the data. What data do we need? Where is our data? Is it spread across multiple systems? And again, I'm sure you've done integrations and migrations in the past. You alluded to that earlier. So then you move on to the D. Once you've done all that, then you can start to look at things like the cloud, as in software as a service. Because if you didn't have your business defined and processes, then you need that to do the data. If you don't have the data, then you can't consider moving, as you said, your ERP from an on-premise to software as a service. But only then, once you've done all that, then you can start looking at the A. So again, that plays back into that RACI matrix. So everyone then says, and if they're fortunate to be large enough to have a chief data officer, everyone then points to the data officer for the piece to work out your data. So there's a data cleanse activity. There's what data are we going to allow our employees to run these tools against? Is it freedom of information request? Well, no, because you don't want to go anywhere near that in the public sector. Is it, as we say, another industry? You don't want anyone to use that data because it's secure data or it's sensitive data based on a different security or internals, or it's intellectual property. So again, it really comes back to sort out your business processes, sort out your data, then decide you want to move cloud, and then come to A. And that's just a sort of second part of my sort of playbook around defining a sort of roadmap and strategy, if you will.
Yeah, I understand. So, and what I'm kind of like surmising now from what you're saying is that ultimately everyone in that C-suite has a responsibility and part ownership of AI.
Yeah. I mean, I only had maybe an hour to do that, and by the end I had a part filled out Reiki and a Reiki matrix, and the R, is that the right R there? So me as the enterprise architect, I may be responsible for coming here today. So I've got an R on there, but we ended up with, it was probably nine wide in terms of the number of C roles, including the sort of extended data and risk governance, and then we had 9 areas of AI, whether it was policy, whether it was security, whether it was sustainability, because CO2 emissions and generative AI tools, 500 milliliters of water every time you have a conversation. So there's that element in it. Then we end up with quite a nice sort of 9-box grid with R's and A's and C's in it. But what you can do from that is then pull out and say, right, in this example, the people director is responsible for the workplace policy. Therefore, we need to do that on the roadmap. And it's then a fairly simple activity after that to get the buy-in, to then help support your business case, to then come back and say, well, we need some funding here to sort this piece of work out, get some seed funding, do the piece of work to complete the RACI, and then come back and do some testing in a safe and secure way.
Yeah, understand. Is there a difference then? You did allude to it earlier when we started talking in terms of the difference between public and private sectors and even different industries. Is there a different kind of narrative that's going on around AI and Gen AI?
Yeah, I mean, you've got
and ownership of it, of course.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and stay away from the politics angle after what happened.
Let's not get into the politics.
Yeah, but if you think of if I was an AI startup and I created that AI toothbrush that we talked about, and I'm selling it into the EU, the European Union, last year. It was ratified an EU AI Act, which I always find difficult to say, which gives laws around what you can do and what you can't do. And one of the big things in there for HR, whether they knew it or not, is a base level of literacy for all staff. Even if you're an admin person, you're not involved in the research and development of that AI toothbrush, you need to be trained on it, because you may see a document that's relevant to that. And if you don't do that, you've broken the law. And if you break the law, a senior manager certification regime, somebody's going to be fined or worse. So there's that element to it. Now, Scotland, where I am, and the UK do not have a similar AI Act. I can't see it coming anytime soon. There's playbooks and narrative. Scotland has something called the Scottish AI Alliance, and that plays back into the public sector, where most of the public sectors, whether it's permanent areas in terms of the Scottish Government for benefits, or it's the environment agencies or health and safety executive, they all talk regularly. We join a meeting, we talk about standards, and there is something called the Scottish AI Register, where if you're using an AI tool, whether it's generative AI or automation to support a public sector service, such as benefit decisions, you have to register on that, because someone will come along at some point with a freedom of information and say, what did that machine do? Did it do it correctly? Was it trained properly?
Yeah.
Did they have the right guardrails in place? So I actually think in this case, the public sector, certainly in Scotland, is way ahead of the private sector, because there's no, that I can see from the work I've done, a single ratifying body or standards. Banking, we've got open banking, so everyone signs up to that, or financial conduct authority. There is no regulatory body, as far as I can see, that's overseeing AI in the private sector. And I think that's one of the real challenges at the moment.
So that's interesting. So there's a real difference in terms of regulation across, geographically and across different jurisdictions around AI. And I'm quite fascinated by this concept of AI literacy. It sounds as though it's something that we all need to be aware of, if nothing else, to understand some of the pitfalls that we might be experiencing as AI becomes more and more embedded in our personal lives and in our work.
Yeah, and I'll do a sort of plug for the AI Alliance, if I may. So www.livingwithai.me. It's open for, I think, another 4 or 5 weeks. I reviewed it before it sort of hit the streets.
Yeah.
Very complete.
It's a shameless plug, Steve. Shameless
plug. When you type it out, it looks like it says "Living with Ty," which is more if you want to go for Just Eat. That's another good website. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, and again, playing it back in sort of this discussion in terms of HR, I think employees are expecting managers, people, directors to roll out training. Now, that's not a simple task, as in we'll go and pick some training, because that training might not be relevant. It might go into way too much technical detail. So again, I was involved in putting training courses together and say, for a digital publisher, for a public sector, what should we be telling staff? You don't need to tell them everything, but you need to give them 20 minutes, half an hour worth of regular reading and viewing for new starts, especially. Here's the rules of the game. You are allowed to use ChatGPT, or you're not. You're not allowed to do text to image, or video, because it contravenes, ESG or sustainable credentials. So I think it's incumbent, I think, on everyone to be as informed as they can. But almost the problem is knowing where to go for that courses and training.
Yeah.
Because there's no, I guess, single, as you say, authoritative body at the moment that's sort of badging it, other than the one I mentioned. So.
And would you say that there's no sort of regulatory body at all across? Obviously, there isn't one for UK and Scotland. There's obviously some elements of it within the Europe. But what kind of regulation would you want to see? What in your view, if you had a chance to go and create something, what would you be wanting to create?
Well, I look quite jealously over to Ireland, and there's a chap who does a lot of good work over there. Obviously Ireland and the EU, so they can cover that off. But safety is the one for me in terms of this. And I think it was quite disappointing after there was a big summit in Paris around AI. Again, we'll stay away from the politics side. But from that, it was interesting that ran almost during something called the Safer Internet Day, which is meant to be a real sort of red letter day for cyber threats, to raise awareness of phishing attacks. Because AI brings the tools, a lot of
it brings bad actors, doesn't it?
Bad actors. That's the phrase. Bad actors into that, and I think the safety angle. So I use analogies. I use storytelling a lot, and I think this is one that's relevant here. So I always liken AI to the invention of the motor car. So 1886, the car was invented. It took something like 40 years for someone to realize, well, we should put some laws around the car. We should maybe put some tax on it.
Yeah.
Maybe people have to go through a test and do some driving license. Now, none of that currently exists. Certainly in the UK for this, it's almost people can just put an email in. You can jump in the car, if you will, and disappear off. So I think it was Niels Bohlin, I think a chap worked for Volvo. He released the seatbelt. He designed the seatbelt, gave it away for free. Volvo gave it away for free because they weren't interested in making money. They just wanted to make things safe. Now, I cannot imagine a software vendor doing that same thing, as in coming up with a really neat way of making AI safe and secure and giving it away for free. I cannot see that happening. I would love to think that the work that the Alliance do, and I know colleagues down in England are doing a lot of that same work around lobbying to make things more safe. But again, government departments, lots of them, all different talking. So again, on that same week of the the safety conference,
Yeah.
they decided to rename the UK AI Safety Institute to the UK AI Security Institute, which is great and aligns with our brothers over the sea in terms of the US, but actually it dismisses the fact that safety and security are two completely different things.
Yeah, yeah.
Security
absolutely.
for me is you jump in the car and lock the door to make yourself feel secure. Safety is you put on that seatbelt.
Yeah.
And it's the seatbelt that I push and say, make yourself aware of the risks before you start sort of thinking about the productivity gains.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a very good analogy, actually, in terms of separation between security and safety and the two really important concepts there. I think it's really sad as well in terms of what you've just said about a software entrepreneur coming up with a safe AI model and then giving it away for free. Because back in the day, when the World Wide Web was first kind of brought out, that was given away for free. But suddenly, the world of capitalism and the way of making money kind of crept into it. So open source isn't really the open source anymore. It is kind of where you get your firewalls and your barriers, so that you've got to pay for the kind of interesting content. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, and it takes me into sort of the thing that, again, coming back to Gartner, so they've predicted by, I think, 2028, there will be a mental health crisis with AI, as in addiction. Now, I can see the attraction of it. You know, you're fed up with all the music on Spotify. I can go and create a song with me singing.
So they're suggesting it's going to layer on top of our addiction already to social media generally.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the idea of, maybe youngsters of the day or anyone picks up their phone in the morning, goes to Instagram, maybe the first thing they'll do in the future is pick up their phone and create a song for the day, which all seems very safe and secure. But again, it comes back, I'm very uncomfortable with software vendors, especially giving away free training for their products. That likens, for me, it's as though they're giving away free candy or sweets, knowing down the line they're going to give you a big bill for the dentists. Yeah. That's what it feels like. They're hooking you in with these free tools for you to become either dependent on them, not in a substance sense, maybe more because of the way it's helping you do your work. Because again, if you're not using AI, the guy next to you or the lady next to you is going to be using it for work. Absolutely. You won't lose your job to AI. You'll lose it to someone that knows about it. So that, again, worries me. And that then comes into that responsibility side and safety. And I think that's where a lot of the narrative between all the governments needs to sort of focus and get some form of agreement and saying, we can agree on chip manufacturing in one country, but actually when it comes to safety, here's the base level. And I think EU did a really good job. It's just unfortunate we're no longer part of it. But again, that's another discussion.
That's another conversation entirely. Yeah. So maybe, Steve, people's fear isn't necessarily unwarranted. Maybe they are sensing that it is going to just be something that's going to layer on addiction and mental health issues that we currently experience anyway through technology. Maybe people are unconsciously already wary of it because of that.
Yeah, there's two fears, I think. There's the fear of FOMO, or fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Again, I don't particularly like the acronym, but again, I can see that from an exec level. I went to a conference and I saw a tool that did Y. It did applicant tracking better than my current applicant tracking system. And it's got AI. I have to be doing that because someone else is doing it. So that fear of missing out, but the fear and trepidation of making a mistake. Again, that comes back to the onus on the company, I think, to give people the guardrails, give people the ability to use it creatively, safely, create working groups, create narrative. If you've got teams, have a discussion about it. Don't hide away from it. It's not going away. AI is here forever. Yeah. I agree. Another great quote that I can't claim credit for, I think, again, came from one of the Scottish conferences, was that, AI is for the 8 billion people that are here now, and then the 800 billion people that come after it. It's not for the 8 billionaires that are left.
Yeah, understand. So, Steve, you're also an AI performance coach. What does that mean?
So again, breaking that up, so there are coaches out there that are AI, as in they're not real, they're synthetic or sentient, that help you do coaching in any manner of means, whether that's leadership coaching or performance coaching. What I'm doing is saying, we've got all these tools here. Now, I come from a bit of a sports background. One of the chaps that I work quite closely with at the weekend is a real lifelong coach. He pivoted from hockey coaching into real sort of leadership performance coaching, and what he suggested is take that same that mantra of taking these tools and use them sensibly, eke out all the things you can from them, do it responsibly. So that the AI, the performance coach, is really around showing, C-suite, showing senior leaders, showing, it's another thing in Scotland, the Scotland Tech Army that do a lot of work in charities. Show that skills, share that around, and try and show people how to do that almost in the same way as if you were a sports coach. If you've played the game, you know how it works. I've played the game with AI, therefore I'm trying to sort of share that knowledge around. So that was the idea, the sort of AI performance coach, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just pick up on the fact that you're a performance coach. What would you say are your top hacks then for HRDs listening into the podcast, bringing in or thinking about using AI within their workplaces?
Well, I've given away the one about the 1950s, so that's you can get that one for one of the three.
Get that one for free.
Get that one for free. I think. I mean, it probably comes looking. There's a good phrase. Past performance is no guide to future success. But I think in this case, we've been here before with the internet. We've been here before with the cloud. This one's not going away. We've been here with electricity. So these are things that will disrupt. It's a case of my hack around the Iraqi piece, certainly. I think another one is put guardrails in place, but make them not sort of really difficult to understand. Don't have 10 of them. Have 5 of them. Put them in an acronym that's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Rails. Just come up with some things that mean something to you as an organization. So if you're a pet food manufacturer, make your responsible AI guidelines, dog, or so that someone can remember them easily. So if you're stuck in a lift with your MD or your your CEO, you can explain AI and explain the terms to them, and everyone that comes in is aware of them. So that's probably the second one. And then the third one is probably pick one general purpose, as I would call them, generative AI tool. Don't allow it to be a free-for-all.
Yeah.
Because there's so many fake tools out there, ones that look like OpenAI and they're not OpenAI if you go to the app stores. So do the due diligence, do your homework. And again, I can help with a lot of that from experience, but pick one, get to know it really well for all sides, the data side, the risk side, the sustainability side. And once you've done your analysis, you'll then say, hang on, we've picked the right one here for our particular need.
Yeah. Okay. And how can we help HRDs actually get the return on investment from what they're going to be putting into to AI?
Well, I think it comes back to don't bet the farm on generative AI, because generative AI is only one of those strands in there. And again, by its very nature, it's generating something. I think the real benefit for HRDs is around, productivity. Because if someone's sitting with a head count and it's maybe a reduction, or it's just to make people feel more valued. If you're doing low value pieces of work, or I'm continually moving this piece of paper around, you can automate that. Now, don't just simply replace the person. Show them how to do that piece of what I would call no-code development. There's lots of tools out there that help them do wizards. So you keep the knowledge of the process in the person. You're not replacing the person, you're augmenting. I think that's a really key word. You're augmenting it with a tool that's not in the hands of the IT. They don't have to wait on a developer for 6 months to go and write a piece of code, because all of that can be done. It feels really scary at the start, but if you pick a small example, and again, the example I used before was something called Frank HR or Frankie HR. And all it was an AI tool using Copilot, which is a Microsoft tool that allowed you as a new starter to ask all the silly questions that you would normally ask someone. Now, if you start in an organization and you're new, you're scared to ask a question. where's the bathroom? Where's, what do you do for nights out? You can make that as, as humorous or casual, or you can make it serious. What's the policy for taking holidays in the event of something happening at home? You can put
That's
all
a
of that in.
great onboarding idea, because those moments when you first start in an organisation are so critical, and that's a really great little tool that you're pitching.
No, and I think from the discussions we've had before that, we all know that the joiner, movers, leavers process is probably broken everywhere.
Absolutely, the toughest one.
Yeah,
the toughest one ever.
Yeah, and that joiner piece helps. You can have that pre-joiner. You could set up one of these tools very simply to say, to engage people. And sites have done that. Yes, you have to watch and not allow it to go rogue. But that would be another tip. So there's four top tips for you.
Ah, wonderful! Thank you. That is absolutely
value
brilliant.
Value add.
It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you, Steve. But before I let you go, can you tell me what is the future looking at around AI then?
So Donald Rumsfeld, so we'll dip into politics, 2002 came up with this phrase, we know what we know what we don't know, but we're unsure about the unknowns. There's too many unknowns. Now, I'm not a betting person. I could predict, where certain elements of it go. You maybe heard of agental AI, which isn't angelic. It's more about doing things. So automation is definitely going to, and we've seen that from the Alan Turing Institute, from the founder of AI, if you will, that millions of hours a year, certainly in the public sector, could be saved for automation. So if I had £1, I would put it on automation. Whether that's robotic, probably robotic automation, and I think that's got the most value. For me, generative AI is interesting from the policy side, but I don't see all of the use cases. Yes, it could potentially help with drug trials and testing that out. I could see that value in certain industries, but I think automation is the broad brush that will help every industry, every level, regardless if you're public or private sector.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely fascinating talking to you about this and really kind of drilling down into your own personal experience around using AI and what that could potentially mean for HRDs and for our workplaces. If anyone wanted to reach out, where can we contact you?
LinkedIn's good probably for everything. I do have a website, but it's a bit long. So LinkedIn, Steve Dorward, or if you look me up also on LinkedIn, it would be the Enterprise Architect AI. There's only
Brilliant.
one.
We will make sure that those details are included in the show notes. Lovely. But for now, Steve, thank you again for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Not at all. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh, right. Don't go. Let's just stop.